Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the massive space station grow larger on the viewing screen. Nexus Prime was unlike anything humanity had ever built. This station looked like a giant crystal flower floating in space, with 12 different sections that each showed a unique style of construction. Some parts glowed with soft blue light, others seemed to be made of living metal that shifted and moved, and one section appeared to be carved from a single, enormous diamond. "First time seeing it never gets old," said Captain Ryan Kelly as he joined Jake at the observation window. "Hard to believe we're actually here." Jake nodded slowly. 6 months ago, humanity had been alone in the universe. Now they were about to join something called the Galactic Coalition, a group of 12 alien species that had been working together for thousands of years. The whole thing still felt like a dream. "All stations report ready, Commander," called out Lieutenant Sam Harris from the communications console. "Ambassador Wright's shuttle is requesting permission to dock." "Permission granted," Jake replied. He watched as the small diplomatic shuttle moved toward the station. Inside that shuttle was Ambassador Lisa Wright, one of Earth's best negotiators, along with a team of scientists and translators. Today would decide whether humanity joined the galactic community or remained alone among the stars. The bridge fell quiet as they waited. Jake looked around at his crew. These were good people, experienced officers who had spent years exploring the edges of human space. But none of them had ever dealt with aliens before. None of them knew what to expect. "Incoming transmission from Nexus Prime," Harris announced. "They're requesting our ship specifications for their records." Jake frowned. "Ship specifications? What kind of specifications?" "Everything, sir. Weapons, defenses, troop capacity, ammunition stores. The whole list." Captain Kelly raised an eyebrow. "That's pretty detailed for a welcome meeting." "Send them." "Our standard diplomatic package," Jake ordered. "Basic information only." A few minutes later, Harris looked confused. "Sir, they're asking why we didn't include our weapons inventory. They say it's required for all vessels entering Coalition space." Jake and Kelly exchanged glances. "Required?" Kelly asked. "Why would they need to know about our weapons?" "Maybe it's just a safety thing," Jake suggested, though something felt off about the request. "Send them the full inventory." Harris worked at his console for several minutes, then looked up with concern. "Sir, I'm getting some unusual responses from the station. They're asking for clarification on several items." "What kind of clarification?" "They want to know why we carry something called nuclear torpedoes, and why we have facilities for manufacturing ammunition during flight. They also asked what we mean by acceptable loss ratios in our tactical database." The bridge went silent. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Those were normal things for any military vessel. Every ship in Earth's fleet carried nuclear weapons. Every ship could make its own ammunition. And every captain learned about acceptable losses in basic training. "Are they questioning our right to carry these things?" Kelly asked quietly. "I don't think so, sir," Harris replied. "It's more like they don't understand why we would need them." Jake thought about this. The Coalition had been at peace for thousands of years. Maybe they had forgotten what real military preparation looked like. Just tell them these are standard defensive measures. On the main screen, they could see Ambassador Wright's shuttle docking with the station. Jake watched the small craft disappear into the massive structure and wondered what kind of welcome she would receive. "Sir," Harris called out again, "we're getting more questions. They want to know about our orbital bombardment capabilities and our ground assault protocols. They seem very concerned about something called our first strike doctrine." Kelly laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "First strike doctrine? We don't even have one of those." "Actually, sir, we do," said Lieutenant Jenny Foster from the tactical station. "It's built into our computer systems. Standard protocol for unknown threats. Jake stared at her. What do you mean? Foster looked uncomfortable. Well, sir, if we encounter a potentially hostile force, our computers automatically calculate the most effective way to eliminate the threat before it can harm us. It's basic tactical thinking. And this is unusual? Jake asked. Apparently so, sir. The coalition representatives keep asking why we would want to attack first instead of trying to communicate. Jake felt that cold feeling getting worse. He was starting to understand that humans might be very different from the other species in the galaxy. What else are they asking about? Harris consulted his screen. They want explanations for terms like strategic retreat, acceptable casualties, scorched earth tactics, and something called psychological warfare. They also asked why our medical bay includes facilities for treating combat injuries. Because people get hurt in fights, Kelly said slowly. Don't their ships have medical facilities? They do, sir, but apparently they're designed for accidents and illness, not battle wounds. Jake sat down in his command chair, trying to process what he was hearing. The coalition species had been at peace for so long that they had forgotten how to fight. They didn't understand why humans would prepare for war, because they couldn't imagine war happening. Sir, Foster said quietly, I'm reading the coalition database that they shared with us. These species don't have any real military forces. They have something they call peacekeeping fleets, but their ships only carry light defensive weapons. Most of their conflicts are solved through talking and trade agreements. Most of their conflicts? Jake asked. All of them, sir. The last actual war in coalition space happened over 3,000 years ago. Jake looked out at the beautiful station floating in space. 12 different species had built this place together, working in harmony for millennia. They had created art and science and wonderful things. But they had also forgotten something important. They had forgotten that the universe could be dangerous. Commander, Harris announced, Ambassador Wright is requesting a channel. She says the first meeting went well, but there are some cultural issues to discuss. Put her through. Lisa Wright's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but hopeful. Jake, the coalition is amazing. These species have accomplished incredible things. But I need to warn you about something. What is it, Ambassador? They're afraid of us, she said simply. Not openly, but I can see it in their body language, their questions, their reactions. When I mentioned Earth's military history, they became very quiet. When I talked about our colonial expansion, they seemed worried. Afraid of us? Why? Right. Paused. Because we think like predators, Jake. Every other species here evolved as prey animals or peaceful herbivores. They cooperate because that's their nature. But humans are different. We evolved as hunters. We think about territory and resources and competition in ways that terrify them. Jake felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together. So when they see our weapons and our tactics, they see monsters, Wright finished. Necessary monsters, maybe, but monsters all the same. The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Nexus Prime continued its slow rotation, beautiful and peaceful, and completely unprepared for the realities of a hostile universe. What happens now? Jake asked. Now we try to convince them that we're the good monsters, Wright replied. Because something tells me they're going to need us sooner than they think. Dr. Amy Patterson was studying alien plant samples in her laboratory aboard the USS Defiance when the emergency alert sounded. The red lights started flashing, and the ship's computer announced that all senior staff should report to the bridge. Immediately, Amy quickly secured her specimens and ran through the corridors, wondering what could be wrong. When she reached the bridge, she found Commander Morrison and his officers staring at the main screen with serious expressions. The screen showed a communication from Nexus Prime. But the usual calm voices of the coalition representatives sounded panicked and afraid. "What's happening?" Amy asked as she took her position at the science station. "We're not sure yet," Morrison replied. "The coalition is calling an emergency meeting. Something about contact being lost with Outer Rim colonies." On the screen, Admiral Vextar of the insectoid klaxon species was speaking rapidly. His translated words came through the ship's speakers in a mechanical voice. 3 colonies have gone completely silent. No distress calls, no evacuation signals, nothing. Our scout ships found empty worlds stripped of all life. Captain Kelly leaned forward. "Stripped of life? What does that mean?" Another alien voice joined the transmission. This one belonged to Admiral Zephyrin of the ethereal Lumina, a species that looked like glowing clouds with eyes. "The colonies are gone, not destroyed, not abandoned. Gone. Every living thing has been removed from the surface. Even the bacteria in the soil is missing." Amy felt a chill run down her spine. In all her years studying biology, she had never heard of anything that could strip a planet of all life so completely. "Do we know what caused this?" Morrison asked. "We have one recording," Admiral Vextar replied. "It came from the colony on Kepler 7, transmitted just before contact was lost." The main screen changed to show a recording from the colonies. Defense Station. Amy watched as something enormous moved across the planet's sky. The ships were unlike anything she had ever seen. They looked organic, like massive creatures swimming through space. Their hulls seemed to pulse and breathe, and strange tentacles reached out from their sides. "By the stars," whispered Lieutenant Foster from the tactical station. "Those things are huge." The recording showed dozens of these ships descending toward the planet's surface. As they landed, smaller creatures poured out of them like a flood. Amy couldn't make out details, but she could see that the creatures moved with purpose and coordination. "The recording cuts off after this," Admiral Zephyrin explained. "When our scouts arrived 3 days later, the planet was empty. The oceans were drained, the forests were gone, even the rocks had been carved away in some places." Amy studied the images carefully. Something about the way the creatures moved bothered her. They didn't act like individual animals. They moved like parts of a single mind, perfectly coordinated and efficient. "Has anyone tried to communicate with them?" Ambassador Wright asked over the communication channel. "We sent first contact protocols to every frequency we could think of," Admiral Vextar replied. "There was no response. They don't seem interested in talking." Morrison looked around the bridge at his officers. Amy could see the concern in their faces. This was completely outside the coalition's experience. For thousands of years, they had solved every problem through discussion and cooperation. Now they faced something that wouldn't even acknowledge their existence. What are the coalition's defensive capabilities? Lieutenant Colonel Matt Hughes asked. He was the senior military advisor on the mission, and Amy could see him already thinking like a soldier. "Admiral," Zephyrin's glowing form flickered with what might have been confusion. "Defensive capabilities? Our peacekeeping fleets have standard protective systems, energy shields, point defense weapons, evacuation protocols." Hughes frowned. "What about heavy weapons? Battle fleets? Orbital defense platforms?" "We don't have such things," Admiral Vextar replied. "Why would we need them? The coalition has been at peace for 3 millennia. Amy saw Hughes and Morrison exchange a look that she didn't like. These were men who understood war, and they were clearly thinking about things that the peaceful coalition had never considered. "Admiral," Morrison said carefully, "how many ships can the coalition put together for defense?" "We have approximately 2,000 vessels in our peacekeeping fleets," Zephyrin answered, "but they're not designed for large-scale combat. Most carry only light weapons intended for stopping smugglers or pirates." "Pirates?" Hughes asked. Small groups of criminals who steal cargo, Vextar explained. Nothing more dangerous than that. Amy realized that the coalition had no idea what they were facing. They had built their entire civilization around the idea that problems could be solved peacefully. They had never imagined meeting something that wanted to destroy them completely. "Dr. Patterson," Morrison called out, "what's your professional opinion on what we saw in that recording?" Amy looked at the frozen image on the screen. The organic ships, the coordinated movement, the complete consumption of all life on the planet. "Commander, I think we're dealing with a hive mind species. Everything they do serves a single purpose, and that purpose seems to be consuming biological matter. Consuming it for what? Growth, reproduction, energy. Think of them like a swarm of locusts, but intelligent and capable of space travel." Amy paused, studying the data. The scary part is that they're probably learning from each encounter, getting stronger, adapting to new environments. Hughes stepped forward. "How do you fight something like that?" Amy thought about it. In nature, the only way to stop a consuming swarm was to destroy it completely or make yourself too dangerous to attack. "You don't fight them like the coalition would fight pirates," she said slowly. "You fight them like your life depends on it." The communication from Nexus Prime continued with reports of more missing colonies. The panic in the alien voices was growing stronger. Admiral Vextar was trying to organize evacuation fleets, but they were moving too slowly. Admiral Zeflin was still trying to send communication signals to the creatures, hoping for some kind of response. "They're not ready for this," Hughes said quietly to Morrison. "These species don't know how to fight a real war." Morrison nodded grimly. "The question is, are we?" Amy looked around the bridge. The USS Defiance was an exploration ship, but it carried weapons that would seem impossibly powerful to the Coalition. Every human ship did. It was just the way humans built things, always preparing for the worst-case scenario. "Sir?" Lieutenant Harris called out from communications. "We're getting reports of more attacks. The outer rim is collapsing." "Whatever these things are, they're moving fast." "How fast?" Morrison asked. "At current rate, they'll reach the core Coalition worlds in less than 2 months." The bridge fell silent. Amy could see everyone doing the same calculation in their heads. 2 months to prepare for a war against an enemy that consumed entire planets. 2 months to convince peaceful species to become warriors. 2 months to save a civilization that had forgotten how to fight. "Commander," Hughes said quietly, "I think we need to contact Earth Command. This is going to require everything we've got." Morrison nodded and turned to Harris. "Send a priority message to Earth. Tell them we have a situation that requires immediate military support." As the message was sent across the vast distance to Earth, Amy wondered if humanity was about to show the galaxy something it had never seen before. She had a feeling that the peaceful Coalition was about to learn why humans carried so many weapons and why they always prepared for war. The enemy was coming, and the galaxy was about to discover what humans were really capable of. Captain Maria Santos watched the Coalition fleet formation from the bridge of the USS Retribution and felt sick to her stomach. 200 alien ships had gathered in the Kepler system to make their stand against the Devourers, and every single tactical decision they were making was wrong. "They're forming a line," reported Lieutenant Tony Rodriguez from the tactical station. "A straight line across the system, about 50,000 kilometers apart." Maria shook her head. "They're making themselves easy targets." "Why aren't they?" "Using the asteroid field for cover?" "I asked Admiral Kelthara about that," said Commander Beth Taylor, who had been serving as liaison with the Coalition forces. "He said that hiding behind rocks would be dishonorable. They want to meet the enemy face to face." "Face to face," Maria repeated slowly, "against an enemy that consumes planets." Through the communication system, they could hear the Coalition. Commanders talking to each other. Admiral Kelthara of the Reptilian Sorrows was trying to coordinate the defense, but his approach sounded like something from an ancient history book. All ships will maintain formation, Kelthara's translated. Voice announced, "We will wait for the enemy to approach, then engage them in honorable combat. No ship will fire until fired upon." Maria felt her hands clench into fists. They're going to wait for the enemy to shoot first? In a battle for survival? It gets worse, Taylor said grimly. I suggested they target the larger ships first, and Admiral Kelthara told me that would be unfair because the smaller ships couldn't defend themselves as well. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from his console with disbelief. He wants to fight fair? Against creatures that strip planets of all life? The Coalition has rules for warfare, Taylor explained. Very detailed rules about honor and fairness and protecting the weak. They've never fought an enemy that doesn't follow the same rules. Maria looked at the tactical display showing the Coalition fleet. The ships were beautiful in their own way, but they were arranged like targets in a shooting gallery. No overlapping. Fields of fire, no backup positions, no escape routes planned. It was going to be a massacre. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Sam Davis from communications. "The Devourers have entered the system. Long-range sensors show approximately 300 ships. 300 against 200, Rodriguez muttered. Not terrible odds if you know what you're doing. Maria studied the enemy formation on her screen. The Devourer ships moved like a pack of hunting animals, spreading out to surround their prey. They weren't forming neat lines or worrying about honor. They were positioning themselves to kill as efficiently as possible. Admiral Kelthara is hailing the enemy, Davis reported. He's offering them a chance to surrender or negotiate. They won't respond, Taylor said. They never do. Sure enough, the Devourer ships ignored the communication attempts and continued their approach. Maria could see them splitting into attack groups, preparing to hit the Coalition line from multiple angles. Captain, Rodriguez said urgently, the Devourers are moving into attack position. The Coalition ships are still just sitting there in their line. Can we help them? Maria asked, though she already knew the answer. Admiral Kelthara specifically ordered us to observe only, Taylor replied. He said the Coalition needed to prove they could defend themselves without human assistance. Maria watched the tactical display as the Devourer ships reached firing range. The first energy blasts lit up space as the organic vessels opened fire on the Coalition line. The alien ships returned fire, but their weapons seemed weak compared to what the Devourers were using. The Coalition ships are taking heavy damage, Rodriguez reported. Their shields are failing across the line. Maria could see ships exploding on her screen. Beautiful vessels that had taken years to build were being destroyed in seconds. The Coalition commanders were still trying to maintain their perfect formation, even as their ships died around them. Admiral Vextar is ordering a retreat, Davis announced, but only for ships that are badly damaged. Only the damaged ships? Maria asked in amazement. The healthy ships are staying to continue the fight, Taylor confirmed. Apparently abandoning your position is considered shameful. Maria watched 3 more Coalition ships explode. The Devourers were systematically working their way down the line, concentrating their fire to overwhelm each ship's defenses before moving to the next target. It was efficient and brutal. Captain, one of the Devourer groups is breaking off, Rodriguez reported. They're heading for the planet. Maria looked at the planet below them. Kepler Prime had over 50 million inhabitants. If the Devourers reached the surface, all those people would be consumed. Are the Coalition ships moving to intercept? She asked. No, ma'am, Rodriguez replied. Admiral Kelthara says they can't break formation. It would expose their flanks to enemy fire. Maria stared at the screen in disbelief. The coalition was more worried about maintaining their battle line than protecting 50 million civilians. They would rather die in perfect formation than save lives through tactical flexibility. Some of the Devourer ships are retreating, Davis called out suddenly. They're pulling back toward the edge of the system. Are the coalition ships pursuing? Maria asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. No, ma'am, Taylor confirmed. Admiral Kelthara says that attacking a retreating enemy would be dishonorable. He's ordered all ships to hold position. Maria felt like screaming. The Devourers weren't retreating in defeat. They were repositioning for another attack. But the coalition commanders couldn't see that because they thought like peaceful beings who followed rules of honor. The retreating Devourer ships are regrouping. Rodriguez reported. They're coming back with reinforcements. The second wave of attacks was even more devastating than the first. The Devourers had learned from the initial engagement and adjusted their tactics accordingly. They concentrated on the coalition command ships first, cutting off communication and coordination. Maria watched Admiral Kelthara's flagship explode in a ball of fire. The noble reptilian had died trying to follow rules of warfare that his enemy didn't even understand. Captain, Davis said quietly, the coalition fleet is breaking apart. Most of the ships are destroyed or fleeing. And the planet? Devourer forces are landing on the surface. The consumption has begun. Maria looked away from the screen. In less than 3 hours, a coalition fleet of 200 ships had been completely destroyed. 50 million people were about to die. And it could have been prevented if the coalition had been willing to fight like their lives depended on it. Captain, Taylor said, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Coalition Council on Nexus Prime. Put it through. The main screen showed the emergency session of the Coalition Council. Representatives from all 12 species looked, panicked and desperate. Council leader Cythera of the crystalline Nexari was speaking rapidly. The Kepler defense has failed completely. We have lost contact with Admiral Kelthara and most of the fleet. The Devourers are now only 6 systems away from our core worlds. Another council member, Admiral Zephlin of the Lumina, added, our remaining forces are scattered and demoralized. We estimate the enemy will reach Nexus Prime within 3 weeks. Council leader Cythera looked directly at the camera. We are formally requesting human military assistance. We know your people think differently about warfare, and we need that different thinking now. Maria felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. The coalition was about to learn what human warfare really looked like. They thought they had seen something terrible when humans carried nuclear weapons and planned for acceptable losses. But they had no idea what humans were capable of when the survival of innocent people was at stake. Tell them we accept, Maria said quietly. And contact General Carter. Tell him the coalition is ready to see what monsters look like when they're fighting for the right side. Admiral Kate Johnson stood in the command center of Nexus Prime, surrounded by alien officers who looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear. The coalition had given her command of their remaining forces, but she could see the doubt in their eyes. They needed her expertise, but they were terrified of what that expertise might require. Show me what we're working with, Kate said to the assembled commanders. Admiral Vexstar activated the holographic display. We have 800 ships remaining from our original peacekeeping fleets. Most are lightly armed and designed for patrol duties. Kate studied the ship specifications. The coalition vessels were beautiful and efficient, but they were built for a peaceful galaxy. Their weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy, and their shields were meant to protect against accidents rather than concentrated enemy. Fire. What about ground forces? She asked. Admiral Zephelin's glowing form flickered. We have security personnel on each world, but they are trained for crowd control and emergency response. They carry non-lethal weapons and follow strict rules about the use of force. Kate felt a familiar weight settling on her shoulders. She had fought in 3 major conflicts during her career, but never against an enemy that consumed entire worlds. And never with allies who were afraid to hurt anyone. "We need to change how you think about this war," she said carefully. "The Devourers don't follow your rules. They don't care about honor or fairness. They only understand strength." Captain Tony Rodriguez, who had been assigned as her tactical advisor, brought up the latest intelligence reports. "Admiral, we've identified the Devourer advance pattern. They're moving in 3 main groups, hitting multiple systems simultaneously." Kate examined the data. The enemy was smart, spreading. The coalition forces thin and preventing them from concentrating their defenses. It was exactly what she would do in their position. "We're going to change tactics," she announced. "No more defensive lines. No more waiting for the enemy to attack. We're going to hit them where they don't expect it." Admiral Vextar insect-like. Features showed confusion. "Hit them where?" "They are the attackers. They're supply lines," Kate explained. "Every army needs resources, even the Devourers. We find their resource-gathering operations and destroy them." The alien commanders looked uncomfortable. Admiral Zephelin spoke first. "But those operations may be taking place on occupied worlds. There could be survivors hiding there." Kate felt the cold logic of warfare taking over. "If we don't stop the Devourers now, there won't be any survivors anywhere. Sometimes you have to accept losses to prevent greater losses." The room fell silent. Kate could see the aliens struggling with concepts that went against everything they believed. They had spent thousands of years building a civilization where every life mattered, where every problem could be solved without violence. Now she was asking them to think like killers. Captain Rodriguez pulled up tactical displays. "Admiral, I've identified 3 Devourer resource operations within striking range. But they're heavily defended." "How heavily?" Kate asked. "Each site has approximately 50 enemy ships. We'd need to commit at least 100 coalition vessels to have a chance of success." Admiral Vextar leaned forward. 100 ships? That's a significant portion of our remaining fleet. If the attack fails, we lose everything. If we don't attack, we lose everything anyway, Kate replied bluntly. The difference is whether we go down fighting or go down hiding. She turned to address all the coalition commanders. "I know this is hard for you. Your species evolved to solve problems through cooperation and discussion. But the Devourers are not a problem you can solve that way. They are predators, and the only thing predators understand is being hurt badly enough to make them stop." "Admiral." Zephelin's light pulsed with what Kate had learned was anxiety. "Admiral Johnson, what you're describing sounds like terrorism. Attacking resource sites, accepting civilian casualties, targeting non-combatants. It's called total war," Kate sighed quietly. "When your enemy wants to completely destroy you, you have to be willing to completely destroy them first." Over the next several hours, Kate worked with Rodriguez and the coalition commanders to plan their first real offensive operation. Aliens struggled with every decision that required accepting risk or potential casualties. "We could use civilian freighters as decoys," Rodriguez suggested. "Draw the Devourer ships away from the resource site." "Use civilian ships?" Admiral Vextar was horrified. "Those crews would be in terrible danger." "They'd be volunteers," Kate pointed out. "And if we succeed, we save millions of lives. But we would be deliberately putting innocents in harm's way." Admiral Zephelin protested. Kate felt her patience wearing thin. "The innocents are already in harm's way. The Devourers are coming for everyone. The question is whether we're going to fight smart or die noble." The debate continued for hours. Every tactical decision became a moral crisis for the coalition commanders. They questioned using captured devourer technology, attacking retreating enemies, and targeting enemy support. Structures. Kate found herself explaining basic military concepts that every human officer learned in training. Why do humans find these decisions so easy? Admiral Vextar asked during a break in the planning. Kate thought about how to explain it. Because we evolved as hunters. For millions of years, humans had to kill other animals to survive. We learned to think about territory and resources and competition in ways that let us stay alive. And the other species in the coalition? They evolved as prey animals or peaceful plant eaters. They survived by avoiding conflict, not by winning it. Admiral Zephlin joined the conversation. Is that why you carry so many weapons? Why your ships are designed for war? We prepare for war because we know it can happen, Kate replied. You didn't prepare for war because you couldn't imagine it happening. Finally, after 12 hours of planning and argument, they had a strategy. 3 simultaneous strikes on Devour resource operations, using coordinated attacks and psychological warfare tactics that made the coalition commanders deeply uncomfortable. Are you certain this will work? Admiral Vextar asked as they prepared to launch the operation. I'm certain that doing nothing definitely won't work, Kate replied. This gives us a chance. As the coalition fleets moved out for their first human-planned offensive, Kate watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The aliens were about to learn what humans meant when they talked about fighting to win rather than fighting to be honorable. But she also knew that this was just the beginning. The Devourers were smart and adaptable. They would learn from this, attack and change their own tactics. The war was about to become much more brutal than anything the coalition had ever imagined. Kate looked around at the alien commanders who were placing their trust in human military thinking. They still saw her as a necessary evil, a monster they had to work with to save their civilization. Soon they would understand that in a universe full of predators, sometimes the most necessary thing was to become the biggest predator of all. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin in earnest, and humanity was going to show the coalition what real monsters looked like when they fought for the right side. Colonel Steve Baker stood in the briefing room aboard Nexus Prime, watching coalition commanders react to his latest tactical proposal. Their faces showed the same mixture of horror and fascination that he had come to expect when explaining human warfare to peaceful aliens. You want to broadcast what to the Devourer hive mind? Admiral Vextar asked, his insect-like features twitching with distress. Images of their defeats, Steve replied calmly. Video recordings of our victories, pictures of destroyed Devourer ships, testimonials from worlds we've saved. We flood their communication networks with proof that they can be beaten. Admiral Zephelin's glowing form pulsed with confusion. But why would showing them our victories help us? Won't that just make them fight harder? Steve looked around the room at the alien officers. After 3 weeks of human-led operations, they were starting to understand how warfare really worked. But concepts like psychological operations still confused them. The Devourers are a hive mind, he explained. They share thoughts and experiences across their entire species. If we can make them afraid, that fear spreads to every single one of them. You want to terrorize them, said Admiral Kelmora, who had replaced the fallen Admiral Kelthara. You want to break their spirit. I want to win, Steve said simply. Fear is a weapon, just like guns or bombs. Sometimes it's even more effective. Dr. Amy Patterson entered the briefing room carrying a data pad with her latest research. The psychological warfare is working better than we expected, she announced. The Devourer forces are showing signs of hesitation in their attacks. For the first time since this war started, they're acting cautious instead of aggressive. Steve nodded with satisfaction. Good. Cautious enemies make mistakes. Aggressive enemies just keep coming until you kill them all. Amy activated the holographic display to show her analysis. I've been studying the captured devourer communication patterns. The fear is spreading through their hive mind like a virus. Individual units are questioning orders, hesitating before attacks, even retreating when they would normally press forward. Admiral Vextar looked uncomfortable. Is it ethical to deliberately cause such psychological damage? Steve stared at him. They're eating entire planets. They've consumed billions of innocent people. And you're worried about hurting their feelings? It's not about their feelings, Admiral Zeppelin protested. It's about what this makes us become. What happens to our souls when we learn to enjoy causing fear and pain? Steve felt the familiar frustration of trying to explain human nature to beings who had never experienced real conflict. We don't enjoy it. We do it because it saves lives. Every devourer that hesitates, every attack they call off because they're afraid, means more civilians survive. Dr. Patterson brought up new data on her display. There's something else. The bioweapon research is showing promising results. The room went silent. For weeks, Amy had been working on a biological weapon designed specifically to target devourer. Physiology. It was the kind of weapon a coalition species had never imagined creating. What kind of results? Steve asked. I've found a way to modify their digestive processes, Amy explained. Instead of breaking down organic matter for energy, the modified bacteria would cause them to break down their own tissues. Essentially, they would consume themselves. Admiral Vextar's compound eyes went wide. You're talking about a weapon. That would cause them to eat themselves alive? It would be quick, Amy said defensively. Much faster than their normal consumption process. And it would only affect the devourers. Other species would be completely immune. But the suffering it would cause, Admiral Zeppelin said quietly. Even for our enemies, such a death would be horrible. Steve looked around the room at the coalition commanders. He could see the war changing them, forcing them to confront ideas that their peaceful civilizations had never considered. They were learning to think like predators, and it was breaking something inside them. The suffering would end the war, he said bluntly. Deploy this weapon, and the devourers either retreat or die. No more consumed worlds. No more billions of casualties. Just an end to the killing. Captain Tony Rodriguez entered the briefing. Room with urgent tactical updates. Colonel, we're getting reports from the front lines. The devourer forces are adapting to our psychological warfare faster than expected. Steve frowned. How fast? They're developing what looks like mental shielding. Some kind of technique that blocks the fear response from spreading through the hive mind. The newer attacks are showing the same aggression levels as before. Steve studied the tactical data. The devourers were smart, adapting to human tactics. Just as humans were learning to fight them. Then we escalate. Time to show them what real terror looks like. What do you mean? Admiral Vextar asked nervously. We stop playing by coalition rules entirely, Steve replied. We target their breeding facilities. We hunt down their command organisms. We make them understand that fighting humanity means facing extinction. The coalition commanders looked horrified. Admiral Zeppelin spoke for all of them. You're talking about genocide. I'm talking about survival, Steve corrected. They want to eat every living thing in the galaxy. We want to stop them. One of us is going to succeed completely, and the other is going to cease to exist. That's not genocide. That's natural selection. Dr. Patterson looked up from her research data. The bioweapon is ready for deployment. But I need authorization from the Coalition Council. Steve turned to the alien commanders. This is your choice. You can authorize the weapon and end this war, or you can keep fighting conventionally and watch more worlds die. Admiral Vextar struggled with the decision. If we use this weapon, we become the kind of species that creates weapons of mass destruction. We become like you. Yes, Steve said without apology. You become the kind of species that survives when something tries to eat you. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Coalition representatives argued about morality and ethics, while reports came in of more worlds under attack. Steve watched them struggle with concepts that humans had been dealing with for thousands of years. Finally, Admiral Zeppelin made the announcement that would change the Coalition forever. We authorize the deployment of the bioweapon. May this universe forgive us for what we're about to become. Steve nodded grimly. The peaceful Coalition was learning the hardest lesson in the universe. Sometimes survival required becoming the monster that everyone else feared. They were about to discover that in a galaxy full of predators, the most successful species was the one willing to be the most terrible predator of all. The war was almost over, but the real transformation was just beginning. The Coalition would never be the same again, and they were starting to understand that maybe that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Admiral Kate Johnson stood in the observation deck of Nexus Prime, watching the celebration outside through the massive windows. Coalition ships filled the space around the station, their lights blinking in patterns that meant victory. The Devourer fleet had retreated into dark space 3 days ago, and the galaxy was finally safe. But Kate felt no joy as she watched the celebration. The war was over, but something fundamental had changed in the galaxy, and she wasn't sure it could ever be changed back. The bioweapon worked exactly as Dr. Patterson predicted, reported Captain Tony Rodriguez as he joined her at the window. The Devourer forces that didn't retreat are completely gone. They consumed themselves down to the last organism. Kate nodded slowly. How many worlds did we save? Intelligence estimates about 200 systems were scheduled for consumption. That's roughly 50 billion lives. And how many Devourers died from the bioweapon? Rodriguez checked his data pad. Approximately 1 trillion organisms across their entire hive mind network. Kate looked out at the celebrating ships. 50 billion lives saved at the cost of 1 trillion lives destroyed. By any logical calculation, it was a victory. But she had seen the faces of the Coalition commanders when they authorized the weapon's deployment, and she knew they would carry that decision for the rest of their lives. Doctor. Amy Patterson entered the observation deck carrying a cup of coffee and looking exhausted. She had barely slept since the bioweapon was deployed, monitoring its effects and making sure it didn't spread to other species. The weapon is completely contained, Amy announced. No other species show any signs of infection. It was designed specifically for Devourer physiology, and it's staying that way. Any word from the retreating Devourer forces? Kate asked. They've gone completely silent. Long-range sensors show their ships disappearing into the void between galaxies. I don't think they're coming back. Kate turned away from the window. Good. Let's hope they learned their lesson about trying to eat everything in sight. The door to the observation deck opened, and Council Leader Cythera entered. The crystalline being moved slowly, and Kate could see that the war had changed her too. The once bright, optimistic leader now seemed dimmed by the weight of the decisions she had been forced to make. Admiral Johnson, Cythera said formally. The Coalition Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's permanent status in our alliance. Kate waited. She had expected this conversation. The Coalition had seen what humans were capable of in war, and now they had to decide whether they wanted beings like that as permanent neighbors. We are offering humanity full membership in the Coalition, Cythera continued, along with territorial rights to 15 systems and a permanent position on the ruling council. That's very generous, Kate replied carefully. What's the catch? Cythera's crystalline form flickered with what Kate had learned was embarrassment. There is no catch. We need you. This war has shown us that the galaxy is not as peaceful as we believed. There are threats out there that we cannot handle with diplomacy and good intentions. Rodriguez stepped forward. With respect, Council Leader, 3 months ago, your people were terrified of our weapons and tactics. Now you're asking us to be permanent guardians? Because we understand now, Sithara replied. You call yourselves monsters, but you are monsters who fight for the right reasons. You could have let the Devourers consume us and taken our territory for yourselves. Instead, you saved us. Amy put down her coffee cup. What about your people? How do they feel about having predators as permanent allies? Sithara was quiet for a moment. They are afraid of you. They will always be afraid of you. But they are more afraid of what might come from the dark spaces between stars. They know now that sometimes the universe sends things that want to destroy everything good and peaceful. When that happens, we need someone willing to be terrible in response. Kate looked out at the celebration again. And if we refuse? If humanity decides we don't want to be the galaxy's watchdogs? Then we will try to become more like you, Sithara said quietly. The Coalition is already establishing military academies based on human models. Our scientists are studying your weapons technology. Our leaders are learning your tactical doctrines. You're turning yourselves into warriors, Rodriguez observed. We're turning ourselves into survivors, Sithara corrected. This war taught U.S. that peace is not the natural state of the universe. Peace is something that must be defended by those willing to fight for it. Amy looked concerned. Are you sure that's what you want? Once you change your nature like that, you can't go back. We can't go back anyway, Sithara replied. We have already authorized the creation of weapons of mass destruction. We have already accepted the necessity of causing suffering to prevent greater suffering. We are no longer the innocent species we were before the war. Kate felt a weight settling on her shoulders. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but in doing so, they had changed it forever. The peaceful coalition was learning to think like predators, and that knowledge could never be forgotten. There's something else, Sithara continued. Our deep space monitors have detected signals from the edge of the galaxy. Something is stirring in the void, something different from the Devourers. Rodriguez looked up sharply. Another threat? Unknown. But our analysts believe it may be responding to the conflict here. The war may have attracted attention from things we don't want to meet. Kate closed her eyes. Of course, it was another threat. The universe was full of predators, and conflict always attracted more conflict. The galaxy had learned to fight, but now it would need to keep fighting. Council Leader, Kate said finally, humanity accepts your offer. We'll be your guardians. Your monsters, your necessary evil. But understand what that means. We're not going to protect you by being nice. We're going to protect you by being more terrible than anything that tries to hurt you. We understand, Sithara replied, and we are grateful. As the coalition leader left the observation deck, Kate looked out at the celebrating ships one more. Time. They were celebrating victory, but she knew the truth. This wasn't the end of the war. This was just the end of the first war. Tony, she said to Rodriguez, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need full military deployment to Coalition space. Whatever's coming next, we need to be ready for it. And Amy, she turned to Dr. Patterson, start working on new weapons, bigger ones. If the universe wants to keep sending monsters to threaten innocent people, we'll show it what real monsters look like. The celebration continued outside, but inside the observation deck, humanity was already preparing for the next fight. They had become the galaxy's guardians, its protectors, its most necessary evil. And in a universe full of things that wanted to destroy everything good and peaceful, maybe that was exactly what the galaxy needed. The war was over, but the age of human guardianship had just begun.